adults and adult learning, and we have a capacity of being able to put together the concerns for colleges and universities, libraries and museums, public television, adult learning activities that will be so much more important in the future. You can't do that in other states. We're the only state that has this kind of comprehensive structure. And I'm delighted that we have it, and I'm very pleased that I have responsibility for it. It certainly is headaches, no question about that, and it's a very large enterprise. But it also has the potential of doing more for education in our population than if we had it splintered in different pieces.
Exciting, no?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, very, I would think. Hello, you're on WGY with New York State Education Commissioner Gordon Ambach.
I understand the necessity for minimum competency, and I completely support the theory. My suggestion is that the overwhelming emphasis placed on this by the state perhaps breeds a certain amount of mediocrity into the educational system, in that it is emphasizing education for the lower half of the students at the expense of those at the upper end of the spectrum.
Well, you make a very important point, and I want to assure you that we are not giving such concentration to this effort that we are forgetting our concerns about challenging the more able students that we have in the state, assuring that we provide a strong program in achieving excellence for education with those children. The competency testing issue has been given a great deal of attention in this past year because we're in the process of shaping that program, of getting the testing right and of setting the requirements in the right direction. And when one concentrates on that at a particular time, it of course does give it a great deal of emphasis. I think that after this year and the program is well established, then there will not be the continuing stress on that part of the program. That is, it won't be a news item at all times. But right now, it's in the process of development, and that means it always is given greater visibility. We are concerned with the level of difficulty of the Regents exams. We're concerned with gifted children, with talented children, concerns of providing a good challenge for children at all levels, and I'm glad to have the chance to assure you of that.
Could you outline for me what your program is for gifted and talented students in the state?
Surely. Programs for gifted and talented vary from one school district to the next because the authority is really with the local school district. There are some funds available at the state level for sponsoring programs or projects for the gifted and talented. We, of course, have some very specialized activities, such as our special schools for the performing arts, one, for example, in orchestra, and another one in dance, and another one in theater, are right up at Saratoga in the summertime at the Performing Arts Center. These take the most talented children from throughout the state, provide a unique opportunity. There are other projects that we have supported in local school districts. But right at the present time, there is no special categorical funding by the state of programs for the gifted. We've been examining that in the department. Legislature asked us to do that last year, and we expect a little later this year to have recommendations as to whether there should be some special funding and some special techniques for identifying gifted and talented children so that there would be a more direct state role.
I'll be watching that with interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling. 382-8100. Hello, you're on WGY with our guest.
Hi, Ellie. I think you got a fantastic show today.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to comment. I think it's time that we went back to the kindergarten through third grade as the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic before we start heading into the sciences and the social studies aspect. Now, I'd also like to ask Mr. Ambach a question. I have a child who at one time was in our local school district. However, he is now in a BOCES situation. However, I also have another child who shows the potential of possibly needing a BOCES situation. But I understand that it is required that if my other child needs, has a possibility of a BOCES situation, that he must first go through a resource possibility, a resource room situation. Now, is there any way, I do feel that my first child has accomplished immensely from the BOCES situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering, is there any way that I can avoid my second child having to go through a resource process?
Well, the decision, of course, for placement for each child, whether it be in the local school district or whether it be in the BOCES program, is made by the local school district, and there's always a special committee which reviews the each child and the appropriate placement. If it's a question of whether there should be a committee review, then I would urge that you contact the local school district, the principal of the school, and make an inquiry as to whether there's a plan for a committee review. On the basis of that committee, then there would be a determination as to whether the child should be placed in the BOCES or whether there should be a provision for a resource room for that child. If, in fact, of course,
and he's not getting it on the local basis. And I went through, I would say, 3.5 years of harassment plus an awfully expensive situation. Now, I'd like to know how long does anyone have before? Now, I know sometime before school is out, that the psychologist is going to call me about explaining to me, because she's going to evaluate my second child.
mm-hmm.
Now, when I see her, if I disagree with a resource situation, he does have the potential of looking a lot towards his first sibling. But I would like to avoid what my first child went through.
Mm-hmm.
As far as
I'm sure you'd like to make the decision just as smooth and as easy as you could, so that the right program is started. I think that's very important to discuss that with the principal, perhaps just after you have had the visit with the psychologist. It may need to be reviewed by the committee. It may not, but the key review is with the principal.
This be committee of the handicapped?
Yes.
Now, I'd also like to, I don't know whether this is a good likely possibility. Now, I didn't know at the time until I was putting my first child into a BOCES situation, and I had talked with your office, that the parents and the child have a right to an education, or the parents have a right, or has to protect the rights of a child for their education.
Right.
And I think that if any parent has a problem with a local school district and they can't seem to get through to the local officials or, principals, supervisors, or what have you, that they should write to your office to get this information. I think would be great. I did, and I found it very beneficial.
Well, I appreciate that. Of course, we like and prefer to have all of these matters settled at the local school district level, but if there's not a settlement there, if it's not satisfactory, then our purpose is to provide assistance at the state level in order to be assured that the correct placement is made. And so if there is a problem that anyone has, why, they ought to contact the department and we'll provide assistance to them.
You're going to have about 7,000 calls, Commissioner, this afternoon. Caller, good luck, and thank you very much for calling. You pointed out some essentials. Take care. We're going to return and talk more with Commissioner Ambach here on Dialogue 81 right after this.
Like to comment on that? May I comment on the basic responsibility? In our state, education is primarily responsibility of the state. That's what's in the Constitution, and that's what's in all our laws. Indeed, local school board members are, in fact, officers of the state. May not have known that, but they're not just elected by local elections, but they are actually officials, and they serve as officers of the state. We do have mixed responsibilities in the state. There are many, many decisions made by local school boards, and I applaud those, and it's very important for us to maintain a strong element of local control of education. But then there are other responsibilities that do reside at the state level, to assure that there's equity, that there's fairness from one school district to the next, to assure that there is an appropriate placement of a child, but there's a way to appeal if, in fact, someone believes that a local decision isn't made correctly. I would like to add just one note on your comment about appeals made to the commissioner. I don't know what your source is by way of your estimate that the decisions have invariably gone to the individual. I would invite that a good, careful review would show that that is, in fact, not the case. There's not an indication on my part or an inclination on my part and my predecessor's part to make those decisions in favor of boards or in favor of individuals. We must make those decisions on the basis of the law. But I think that you would find over time that your assertion that they have been in the direction of individuals is just not the case.
Well, I thank you for the correction. From what I had heard, that in situations similar to the one that we have been going through for the past 3 years, that
well, you always have, of course, you have in any particular locality or particular school district, there may be a particular case, and of course, one side or the other must win. That's going to incline it in that direction in that particular district. But you have to look at it as the state as a whole.
When a decision is made, are the future consequences thoroughly considered by your office?
Of course.
Where are you from?
I'm from a Mohawk Valley town which has been undergoing some litigation over a personnel problem and high legal expenses for 3 years, and largely based on a decision that was made 3 years ago by the commissioner. We're still not finished.
Oh, can't say the place, huh?
No, I'd rather not. I don't know.
Surely.
Okay.
I think you might be able to figure it out. It's still going on.
But I can't. Anyway, I thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye-bye now. A lot of people interested in education for gifted children, as a matter of fact, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Hello, you're on 81 WGY.
Yes, I would like to say that I'm very much in favor of these competency tests that they're given. I think they're long overdue. I feel that many children, when they're very young in school, are labeled as slow or poor, and they're never really given a chance to learn to read, that they're kind of just pushed along. And so by having these tests required, I think it's going to put the responsibility back on the school and the teachers to really try to teach the kids.
I think that's exactly what's happening. And one other thing is happening that you might be interested in. We've been giving the preliminary competency test to 8th and 9th graders just in the last month and a half. These are in reading and in writing. And the results that I get back from the local school districts indicate that the students are taking these tests now with a much greater sense of seriousness and sense of purpose than they have in the past. And that's exactly what this program is all about. It's to be sure that there are clear standards, that students know that those standards are to be met, and to provide a motivation for students to go at those standards, gain the competencies, and be able to complete their work. And I've been hearing this over and over and over as I talk with those in the different school districts, and I'm tremendously encouraged by that. Students today, and I meet with a large number of secondary students right through each year, are much more concerned about their gaining their own competencies in these foundation skills than was true 3 or 4 or 5 years ago. And that's a very healthy sign.
Yeah. What does concern me a little bit, though, is that this program is being put into effect so soon, because certainly ones in the beginning are going to be suffered. Like, shouldn't it start off with a low level, say, like when it first goes into effect, it should be like with a 3rd grade class, and then follow them on through high school, so that these kids down in 3rd grade who are below their level is going to get the attention they need and the help they need to keep them up all the way through school.
Well, you're quite right in that each student needs to have the competencies built over a long period of time. It has to start in the very early grades and then develop. There have to be test points along the way to be sure that the students are on target, and if they are not up to standard at that point, they're given special assistance. I would point out, though, that for the students graduating at this time and in the future, we actually did begin testing with them back in their 9th grade years, and in some instances their 8th grade years, so that it is not as if they've just been facing or confronting these tests. They've had an opportunity to display their performance levels over the past few years.
Commissioner Ambach, haven't there been tests for reading and math all the way along for the low grades?
Oh, yes, indeed. In fact, there have been state tests at the 3rd and the 6th grade levels.
The PEP
tests. Those go back to 1967. Those were the first PEP tests given at the statewide level. And local school districts, of course, have been testing virtually at each grade level on some kind of standardized or district test for a long, long time, way back.
Caller, thank you very... Oh, I'm sorry. You got more comments?
Yes.
Okay.
I feel, though, like in the past, tests were given at the school level to say, well, this kid can only perform this well, this one can only perform this well, rather than saying, well, look at, he's not performing as well as you should. We've really got to give him extra help. We've got to find some way so that he can do better. Kids were labeled as only ability to these, rather than saying, well, look at, he's not being taught the way he should be taught to bring out his ability.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I agree with you that the principal reason for a testing program is to identify those that need help and then get the help to them.
But hasn't that, in fact, been the case in some cases? I know that we did several programs a couple of months ago with elementary school reading teachers, and they are certainly the front line and the bottom line. And I know that for many of them, the tests and the levels at which the kids operate or perform on the test have been indicators to them. This child needs more work here. This child needs more work there. This is the level I'd like to bring the child up to. It hasn't been just a question of, aha, that's where they are, and on we go. They have used them for in-class remedial purposes.
No question about that. I think what's important about the competency testing program is that it provides some benchmarks which are the result, or which must be reached after a period of years of study. Instead of having just testing from one year to the next and using those tests for instruction within that year, what these tests now provide is a target that's out there as to what level of competence this child should reach over the course of several years of study. And that's a very important kind of target to have.
I thank you very much, caller. We're just about out of time. It's really amazing, and we've got a board filled with calls, so I would like to give you a few moments to perhaps mention some things that you'd like to talk about, some things that you feel the department is going to be working on that might be of great benefit to us. What are some results we might be able to see in a couple of years, or some new programs? Commissioner?
I would like to comment about the general health, if you will, of education, or the state of education in New York. We've been talking about levels of quality. We've been talking about problems. We've been talking about the ways in which we need to improve the system. We always need to look at those questions and problems against certain important facts about education in New York. Students in New York State perform very, very well in comparison with students across the rest of our country. And students in secondary schools perform particularly well on some special indicators. When we look at the college admissions test, for example, students in New York State on the achievement test score very substantially above others.
One brief question. What would you like to get rid of in education? And I know there are many things you want to add. What would you like to get rid of? One thing in 10 seconds.
Right. What I would like to get rid of mostly is the level of vandalism, of disruption, of difficulty, of the lack of abeyance of rules and regulations that we have in so many of our schools, but beyond that we have throughout our society. The matter of developing civic responsibility is really of great importance. That's what I'd like to get rid of, is the obverse side of that.
And I want to thank you. We have to get rid of you at the moment, New York State Education Commissioner Gordon Ambach. It's been a pleasure. And just on the basis of the last comment that you made, I certainly would foresee some fine programs with you and other members of your department in the future. Many issues to discuss in education. Tomorrow we shift gears. It's Beauty with Elizabeth Martin. Have a good day.
Alice L. Foley Lecture, Nazareth College, Rochester, New York, August 17, 1979.
Today is a very special day also on another account. Today we are honored indeed to welcome to the Nazareth College campus the Commissioner of Education for the State of New York, who also holds the title as the President of the University of the State of New York, Mr. Gordon Ambach. As the Chief Educational Officer of the State of New York at all levels and for both public and independent institutions, Commissioner Ambach is charged with maintaining the quality, the scope, and the effectiveness of the entire educational enterprise of the Empire State. He is the voice of education for the entire state in all its aspects. And we here at Nazareth College are proud to be a part of that enterprise, proud to be one of the institutions under his jurisdiction. To his task, he brings a broad and diverse background of more than 20 years of experience as teacher at both secondary and university levels, as an administrator within state, federal, and local educational agencies, and as a distinguished scholar and humanitarian. After serving for 7 years as Executive Deputy Commissioner for the state, 2 years ago, the regents of this state appointed him Commissioner of Education. In short order, he has proved the wisdom of that decision of the Board of Regents. And I'm happy to say that we have one of the regents here, Mary Alice Kendall, and a regent emeritus here, Helen Power. Today, he has graciously accepted our invitation to break away from his busy schedule in Albany and in New York City to deliver the 5th annual Alice L. Foley Lecture before this distinguished group of Rochester area educators and students. He has selected as his title, The Goals of Education. I know you are as anxious as I am to learn how this distinguished gentleman and our leader views the future of education in our state and to gain a deeper understanding of teaching and of learning in our society today. Ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely pleased and honored to present to you the leader and chief spokesman for education in the state of New York, Commissioner Gordon Ambach.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. President, for your introduction. Dr. Foley, here on the platform. My friends, students who are here at Nazareth, special representatives, members of the Board of Regents, it is indeed a great privilege for me to join you today on this occasion, to be here with you in this beautiful auditorium, and to share some thoughts with you in this Alice Foley Lecture. It's a real privilege for me to be invited to present this lecture. Back in 1958, 59, and 60, I happened to be teaching the social studies in the 7th, 8th, and 12th grades of our state. I had an assignment in Long Island in one of the public school districts, and in addition to my teaching, I also had responsibilities in our Teachers Association. In my 2nd year of teaching, I was the vice president. In my 3rd year, before tenure, I might add, I was the president of the Teachers Association of the East Williston School District. And for 2 years, I had the privilege of being a member of what was then known as the House of Delegates of NYSTA. During that time, both as president of that organization and as member of the House of Delegates, it was indeed my personal privilege to see the work of Alice Foley in NYSTA and to learn from her representation and the example that she gave to all of us in teaching of the importance of those who are in teaching. Alice has served this college so very well for so many years, as Chief Executive Officer, as member of the board. When she retired from the New York State Teachers Association in 1967, and NYSTA's president added, quote, "Through her own leadership and professionalism, Alice Foley has gained for the teaching profession in our state a position of respect and prestige that is recognized by teachers throughout the country," end quote. As I think of her, I think of a story that I'd like to share with you about a woman who had aspirations of being one of the world's great tightrope walkers. And she practiced and practiced and practiced. She warmed up on rather small tasks or jobs, if you will, and then decided to take on the biggest task that any tightrope walker took on, and that was to walk the rope across the Niagara Falls. The day came for this great feat, and it turned out that it was a stormy day, but she'd practiced indeed even for that. This feat was to be handled not only with walking across on the rope, but pushing a wheelbarrow in front, just to add an extra dimension. The day came, the storms were there, the winds were blowing, and up she picked the wheelbarrow, went across, made it to the opposite side. And there, as you can imagine, there was quite a crowd awaiting. It was a very enthusiastic crowd, warmly greeted in the reception, but two people stepped forward from that crowd, and one said, "I think that was really a rather remarkable feat. But if you'd really like to display that you're at the top with respect to this particular task, I suggest you might turn the wheelbarrow around and go back across the other direction." The other person who stepped forward rather skeptically said, "You know, that really wasn't much after all. My suggestion, if you really wanted to demonstrate your objective, is to turn that wheelbarrow around and go back over again." Now, she said nothing, but in fact did pick up the wheelbarrow handles, turned it around, put the wheel on the rope, and then looked back over the shoulder and said, "All right, if you two would care to step in, I'm ready to go." That kind of spirit, that kind of sense of purpose is the kind of spirit and sense of purpose of which I'd like to speak this morning. And speak on a broad topic, goals of education, but to speak particularly about the connection of our actions to our goals for education. To be certain that if we are stating goals and objectives, we are also discussing the ways in which we're going to be reaching them. And I think it's appropriate to start by way of making a comment or two about a concern for our capacity, indeed perhaps making a point of two with respect to the term confidence, a term which our president was using just a couple of days ago in his announcements and his presentation to the nation. Those of us in New York State in the course of the last several years have faced some extremely difficult problems, fiscal crises in the city of New York, which spilled over to fiscal crises throughout our state. We have faced some very difficult changes with respect to the demographic characteristics, declining population as well as declining enrollment in our state. Many, many concerns. These have troubled us all. But I think what's extremely important as we look back over those few years is to think of the fact that we have indeed met certain very critical circumstances. We've met them with vigor, and we've met them, I think, quite well. If we look at education right now in our state and ask certain questions about performance or ask certain questions about confidence, yes, indeed, we know there are problems. We know there are yet goals to be met, but we must also be thinking about what, in fact, has been accomplished. We must think, for instance, about the fact that in 1978, in our statewide PEP testing program, that's testing at the grades of 3 and 6, in reading and in arithmetic, that for the first time since 1966, The results on the PEP test statewide showed that performance in our state was higher than it was in 1966 at third grade reading and third grade math. It was higher than it was in 1966 in reading at the sixth grade. Math wasn't up there, but at least we've seen now for the last 2 years a very decided upturn in the results. If we look at some other kinds of performance results in our state, for example, the results where we're in competition, if you will, or can be compared with other states in this nation, we can also see some encouraging results. If you look at SAT scores, for example, for New York students as against those in other states, and you look at the achievement exams overall in that SAT program. To use some point scores, for example, the median New York score on all the achievement tests, that is of a New Yorker, is at 555. That's a full 35 points higher than the median for the whole nation. And if you look at every single one of those achievement tests, you will find that, in fact, performance scores in New York are significantly higher. If you look at special competitions like advanced placement, Westinghouse, Merit Scholars, take the Westinghouse Science Talent Search. New York, we have 10% of all the seniors in this nation. Last year in that national competition, of those 10% of our seniors, they took 37.5% of the national awards in the Westinghouse Talent Science Search. If you look at advanced placement, we have 23% of all the advanced placement work that's being done in the country. And if you look at merit scholarships, we have 19 to 20% consistently of all the merit scholars in the country. I simply want to give those illustrations because as we search for ways in which to improve our educational system, we must also recognize the solid base from which we're operating. If you look at the issue of confidence today with respect to those making decisions about certain aspects of education, let me cite just a couple of examples. Our New York State Legislature in this past year has approved an additional appropriation for public elementary and secondary education in the amount of some $250 million and taken other significant actions. I grant you not all that everyone may have wished for, but that's an extremely significant increase in assistance. If you take a look in yet another area of what the legislature did with respect to actions in education, those affecting this particular institution, the Bundy Aid Program or the TAP program, significant increase in Bundy. Not this year, which we had advocated, but a very significant increase, double that, if you will, which is coming at a later time. I could add other examples, but they all add up, in my judgment, to an indication that where you have key decisions being made about education, there is a genuine reservoir of confidence and support in this very, very important enterprise. And one last indicator. If you go back into the elementary and secondary realm for just a moment and look at what's happening across our state right now with respect to the votes on school budgets. This year across New York State, 86% of the votes on school budgets showed that the budgets were passed on the first time around. That's the highest percentage that we've seen, certainly for the last decade and probably for 15 years. Last year it was 66%, or if you put it the other way around, 34% were defeated, as again 14% this year. And in this very county, my understanding and recollection is 100% approvals on the first round. Now, there are lots of reasons for this, but I think that what's important as we begin to look at goals and future directions is that indeed we think about the base from which we are operating, and particularly think about the fact that there is that reservoir of support and confidence across our state in education. As your president indicated in introducing me, I represent the University of the State of New York. Not just the colleges and universities, public and independent, not just the school systems, public and non-public, but our museums and our libraries, our public television, our historical societies, all of the professions, in fact, that are registered and licensed by the regents. An enterprise in New York State which is just absolutely extraordinary in its scope, in its size, and in its potential. Because indeed we have here something that is so unique that all different parts of education are seen as they are linked together from the very most elemental and early years of schooling or of learning through to the most advanced levels of education. I would like to focus this morning for just a few moments on particular goals for higher education. Goals of quality and of access. And I'd like to focus on these because come 1980, we will have in our state the next opportunity for the preparation of a very major plan for higher education in New York State in the decade of the 80s and beyond. Our goal is that all citizens of the state who wish to pursue post-secondary education and are able to benefit from it should be able to do so. They should be able to choose among diverse programs and institutions. Diversity and choice are meaningless unless financial resources are available that enable students to act on their choices. We in the department and the regents play a very particular role as advocates for those goals of access and of quality. With respect to quality, we have a particular concern both for the initial registration of all of the separate programs that are offered across the state in the independent and the public institutions. And I might note there are some 15,000 different programs that are offered at one institution or the other in the state of New York. Since 1890, we've had a very particular role of reviewing and of making determinations as to whether those programs are of satisfactory quality. The regents, you should know, are in fact recognized, a nationally recognized accrediting agency, like Middle States, in a sense, and the other regional accrediting bodies. They are so recognized because of this importance of assuring that through program registration, there is a strong quality of offerings throughout the state. That function of registration and the assurance of quality is very definitely hinged with the kinds of decisions that the legislature or the governor may make with respect to the allocation of resources to our institutions of higher education. Because when they make a determination that there should be Bundy Aid or that there should be Einstein or Schweitzer fellowships and professorships, or when they make decisions about TAP funds, when they make decisions with respect to allocations to the state university or to the city university, in fact, they are making those decisions on the faith that there is a careful review of the quality of the programs in both the independent and the public sectors. There is a second illustration that I would like to give with respect to the matter of quality, and that is the special reviews that we are making of programs at the doctoral level. We've been doing that for several years in our department. But the program review that is coming up is of particular importance, I think, to those in this audience, and that is a review of all the doctoral programs in the field of education. There are no fewer than 388 separate doctorate programs offered by the several institutions of higher education in the state of New York. 388 of them. We are now undertaking a review of those programs for the purpose of making determinations together with the institutions as to the quality and assisting the institutions with respect to the mission and the way in which those programs will be offered in the future. Another area of concern with respect to quality, and that, teacher education. On the one hand, a concern with competency-based teacher education, programs which have been given such serious attention here at this college and have been developed so well with respect to trying to match what the college resource is, together with that in the school districts and in the non-public schools, to assure that there is a sensitivity, a reality to the training which is underway in order to effectively prepare teachers. In addition to that, a concern for in-service training, the kind of effort so many of you are involved with during the course of this summer. And I would note an effort which becomes ever more important, especially as we look at declining enrollments in elementary and secondary education and what has been a reduction in the admission of new teachers into our school systems. The numbers of new teachers into the systems in the past 2 years have been at approximately the 1 to 1.5% range. That's very different from what happened in the 60s or indeed even in the early 70s. And it makes so much more important a continued focus on what we are doing with respect to in-service training. And a third element which is very important in teacher training and in providing the support, the nourishment, the assistance to those in teaching now. And that is our concern about the recognition of teaching as a profession, a concern as to whether there should be a change in the licensure pattern, a change in the way in which we at the state level make determinations as to who should be permitted to teach, and indeed who should continue to teach after once licensed. These are issues which will be before the Board of Regents this next week and then on into the fall as we deliberate on whether there should be a formal designation and recognition in law of teaching as a profession with all that that carries with respect to matters of discipline, with respect to matters of the kind of support and control that we have in the profession. All issues with relationship to quality. Now let's turn for a moment to the issues of access. And of particular concern, the matter of access and whether or not we are going to be able to provide for a full and strong higher education system in the future in our state. The difficulties facing higher education in the next decade, I think, are quite clearly known. At the top of the list is the diminishing number of people in the 15 to 24-year-old age group from which colleges have traditionally drawn roughly 86% of their students. The size of this age group will decrease by 16% nationwide in the period of 1980 to 1990. And indeed, that decline will be even greater here in the state of New York because emigration is in fact reducing our population with respect to the other states of the United States. In addition to being older and less numerous, the population of New York State is also forecast to include increasing proportions of minorities, the disadvantaged, and the groups whose native language is other than English. These population groups traditionally have had the lowest rates of college participation. And so we have a very genuine concern with respect to what the enrollment of the student body may be in the course of this next decade. And among many of the institutions up to this point, this has led to certain scraps and certain battles with regard to what share of the enrollment might be held, or with respect to what slice of the pie, if you will be provided or will be cared for in which of the institutions. The potential of having an increase in this kind of competition, and indeed battle, is very real. And I invite our consideration, independent and public institutions, in joining together at this stage, and particularly through our master plan for 1980, to be giving as much thought to the questions of how is it that, in fact, we can either maintain the size of our higher education operation or increase it, as is given to the issues of relative competition among institutions or across the sectors. Indeed, our goals overall of access and the goal of having a strong system which can provide that access and quality, I think, is hinged on how we deal with the issue of maintaining an overall enrollment and indeed expanding it. I'd like to suggest 3 points that are of principal concern and I think set an agenda for the several colleges and universities to work together. The first one has to do with the way in which our colleges and universities may see new roles in supporting the developments of high technology, research and development, together with the economic sector of our state. We've been looking more and more carefully at what has happened in the past few years with respect to research and development activities in New York as against other states. And in certain respects, the analysis is disappointing. In fact, if you look at total federal resources, which comprise a very significant part of research and development funds, we see that, in fact, in New York, there has been a net decrease in the total amount of federal R&D funds. Interestingly enough, that decrease has not been a decrease in those funds that go to the colleges and universities. Those, in fact, have increased. The decrease has been the research and development money that goes into industry or research corporations, those entities outside of the colleges and universities. And that reduction has been very significant in New York. The potential, in short, for the colleges and universities, whether it be independently, whether it be with certain statewide efforts, whether it be regionally, with a perfect example being the potential of the Rochester area colleges, the organizational arrangement that exists here. The potential is to reach out and to assist in joint efforts with business and industry and with certain governmental agencies by way of trying to assure that there is a focus on the fashion with which our educational enterprise can link together with the economic enterprise in trying to strengthen both, in trying to strengthen the economy of the state, and indeed in trying to assure a stronger role in this area for the colleges and universities.